Now, I don't want to alarm anyone, but things outside have gotten a little weird lately. Okay, not lately at this point. Things have been pretty weird for quite some time now. Autobiographically speaking, I got one full semester in college before the plague hit. As weird plus, though, I started the show. Of course, depending on how you feel about the show, well, all 5 of you that watch regularly, of course, it might be less of a plus than just a, So that's something a person could certainly do to eat up a ton of their time.
Yep.
If you don't happen to like the show, don't blame me, blame COVID.
Yep.
However, if you do like the show, then it was all me.
And don't forget about me, man.
Shut up, Craig.
You shut up.
Shut up.
So as I was saying before I was so rudely interrupted, infection, election, insurrection, invasion, inflation, and these are just the things that end in ION that are seriously out of control. Not a day goes by without some mention in the news of some pretty apocalyptic shit. The recent racially motivated mass shooting in Buffalo that killed 10 and injured 3 was the 198th mass shooting in 2022 alone, according to the Gun Violence Archive. School shootings, synagogue shootings, concert shootings, church shootings, grocery store shootings, road rage, Karens, cops, they're killing people like hotcakes out here.
That is so true.
And if the plague didn't give you enough reason to stay indoors, the rash of focused and unfocused violence randomly occurring might give you a moment's pause at the front door. This nonsense seems to be coming out of nowhere all the damn sudden. Or does it?
Mm-hmm.
So, here's the thing. We are smack dab in the middle of the culmination of a 50-year cycle of violence. What? I hear you saying. 50 years? Nobody remembers anything for that long. Violence? Hasn't it always been this fucked up? The answer to both of those questions is no, actually. As a matter of fact, boomers and Gen Xers are currently on their second round of this shit.
Word.
But what, you may ask, is the 50-year cycle of violence? Good question. In 2012, entomologist and cliodynamicist Peter Turchin published a paper on the dynamics of sociopolitical instability in the United States between 1780 and 2010. Now, I can feel some of y'all pulling back. They're like, Ento what? Cleo, huh? Don't worry, I'll explain. An entomologist is a person who studies or is an expert in the branch of zoology concerned with bugs. A cliodynamicist is someone that studies a transdisciplinary area of research that integrates cultural evolution, economic history, macrosociology, the mathematical modeling of historical processes, and the construction and analysis of historical databases. In simpler terms, a big honkin' math-based history nerd.
Yeah.
Cliodynamics treats history like a science. Its devotees formulate hypotheses that explain things like the rise and fall of empires, population booms and busts, and the spread and disappearance of religions. So, anyway, Pete the Bug Guy wrote a paper in which he describes a database of sociopolitical instability in the United States between 1780 and 2010. The data includes 1,590 political violence events, such as riots, lynchings, and terrorism. Social and political violence fluctuated over the 230 years covered by the database. Two main patterns emerged. First, it was a secular cycle, presenting as an instability wave during the second half of the 19th century, bracketed by two peaceful periods, the first quarter of the 19th century and the middle decades of the 20th. The second is a 50-year pattern, with peaks around the 1870s during the Jim Crow Reconstruction era, the 1920s during the Great Depression and Prohibition, and the 1970s at the tail end of the Vietnam War and the Civil Rights era. These patterns are evident in other historical forms of political instability, such as the fall of Rome, medieval and early modern England, and the French and Russian revolutions. A possible explanation of this, as discussed in the article, is offered by a structural demographic theory. The fundamental problem stems from a bloated elite class, with too few elite jobs to go around, declining living standards among the general population, and a government that can't cover its financial positions. This produces a wave of prolonged and extreme socio-political instability. In simpler terms, a few obscenely rich people seem to delight in making life unbearable for hordes of increasingly disadvantaged poor people, to the point where shit has nowhere to go but really damn sideways.
Yeah.
But why, you may ask, does this lead to increased violence? Glad you asked. Let's break it down. First, when elites are faced with a surge of labor that slows growth in wages and productivity, they tend to take a larger portion of the economic gains for themselves. This exponentially drives up inequality. For example, compensation for CEOs is on average 278 times greater than their average worker. Not their lowest paid worker, their average worker. The income gap was only a 20-to-1 ratio back in 1965. To put this in perspective, Elon Musk makes about $23,000 a minute. That is almost twice what a minimum wage earner is able to earn in working 40 hours a week in a year. He makes more money per second than a lot of people make per week. And next, when faced with greater competition or elite wealth and status, those already reaping the benefits of a rigged system throw up roadblocks in the path of upward mobility. They make it harder for people to move up the social and economic ladder, keeping the positions for themselves and their kids. In a society trending towards meritocracy, elites fight to keep places at top universities limited and raise the entry requirements and costs in ways that favor children of those who had already succeeded. Rich people make it harder for other people to get rich. Remember, kids, you can't spell greedy bastards without go fuck yourself. Finally, this creates anxiety in those trying to hold on to their ever-expanding fortunes. They do all they can to avoid taxation of their wealth and profits, even if that means starving the government of much-needed revenues. The result is a decaying infrastructure, declining public services, and fast-rising government debts. People with this level of wealth can buy the influence to keep their taxes and societal obligations low. They don't worry about shitty roads or failing public schools because their wealth shields them from hardships experienced by those not in the elite class. Basically, when there are too many extremely rich people for those positions of power that extremely rich people usually scoop up, some of them go rogue and buy themselves into power by throwing assloads of cash at elections. The Trump crime syndicate is the hyperinflated human face of elite overproduction. Well, not so much human as a walking pile of orange crap, but you know the point. But hey, aren't we supposed to be talking about violence?
Yeah, where's the violence?
Yeah, man, where's the violence?
It's right up here.
Okay, good.
This
Bring
type
on
of
the violence.
selfishness.
Shut
Shut
up,
up,
Greg.
Greg. This type of selfishness comes from elites, causes revolution. It creates a boiling cauldron of fear and discord made worse by greater inequality and declining effectiveness of and respect for the government. Take a moment and think about the last few weeks. Okay, now that you're done with your panic attack, think about this. The rise in domestic and foreign political instability comes as commodity prices have risen to their highest levels in years, leaving many governments struggling to maintain their citizens' living standards. Supply chain issues, skyrocketing gas prices, impossible housing prices, massive student loan debt, food insecurity, violence against women, people of color, and the LGBTQ community have become an inescapable part of daily life. People are on edge. I mean, how many of those videos have you seen on social media of someone losing their shit over something trivial or insignificant? How many stories have you seen on the news about someone shooting up a place? Hell, we still haven't completely dealt with the 1/6 erection, and that was over 500 days ago now.
Erection?
Erection, Mabel? You sure?
Are you sure it was
I don't think that was the word you was looking for, Mabel.
We'll fix it in post.
No, the 1/6 what?
The 1/6 insurrection.
Insurrection!
Yeah, an erection is a completely different thing.
That's different. That's front tail stuff.
Although, honestly, it's not too dissimilar since we all got fucked anyways.
Yeah, there it is.
Oh.
Oh.
So, going past that,
How many days ago was it?
that was over 500 days ago.
There it is. Okay.
Alright, back on track. Fix it in post.
Yeah, sure.
The baby formula shortage has the potential to turn really ugly really fast. Is it all that hard to imagine a parent trying to get formula to feed their baby going completely apeshit if somebody grabs the last can right in front of them? I don't have kids, but if my baby was hungry and some jackass swooped in and bought the last batch of infant edibles right in front of me, just saying that H-E-B sometimes sells butcher knives. And it's not just supply shortages making people nutsy. I mean, who hasn't been stuck on in traffic on I-35 and seriously contemplated low-scale genocide? Just me?
Yeah.
What the word I'm looking for is anyway. Now, imagine that you were at the end of your rope. Disease, unemployment, inflation, and extreme tribalistic partisanship are all ingredients for a revolution. The real problem is, as it has often been in these scenarios, that the raw anger and frustration people feel is rarely aimed in the right direction. Regular folks are acting out on other regular folks. The political and economic elites keep the rabble fighting amongst themselves by preying on their beliefs and superstitions. In their efforts to retain and amass even more wealth, rich people with power are convincing those without power to act against their own best interests. Tale as old as time, vodka with the lime, fighting amongst the least.
Oh, that was beautiful.
Thank you. It's very simple. Those who fail to learn from history probably took non-AP classes in Texas. Yes, I took all AP classes, but I digress. The subtitle to this show, really.
Yes, it's all a digression.
This is not new. Every 50 years or so, things get really scary and out of control. Cycles of violence are not always unproductive, though. The civil rights and women's rights movements, unionization, and the creation of the social safety net started with political unrest. In some ways, all social movements of consequence start with people standing up for themselves and saying no. According to Pete the Bug Guy's research, this too shall pass. What the world will look like on the other end, however, is a lot harder to predict. I mean, the difference between now and all the other shakeups in the past is the internet.
Yep.
Everybody's favorite. People can more effectively organize through social media and mass communications. This is a good thing. However, people can also be fed a steady diet of misinformation disguised as real information. The Buffalo shooter was indoctrinated by white replacement theory and white supremacy screeds. Oh, sure, you say. The internet is a cesspool of filth and fear. And while that's true, this misinformation and hysteria is also available 24 hours a day on Fox News.
Oh, peanut.
So, where does it all end? Well, Timmy, stop interrupting and I'll tell you. If this historical cycle plays out as usual, all of this should result in another advancement for humankind. With looming global crises like climate change, it's gonna take all of us pulling our shit together and getting past this internal squabbling. I guess you can understand why the super rich dudes are building privately owned spaceships at this point. They know that once people figure out who is really to blame for all the suffering and misery, they're gonna need a quick exit strategy.
Yeah.
I sure hope that Mars doesn't hold Musk, Bezos, Page, Ellison, and Zuckerberg against us. Live long and prosper. We'll be right back with our comedian Andy Kindler. Stick around.
Yeah!
Insurrection.
Insurrection.